On the morning of May 4th, 2017, Heather Nicole Turner was found on the tile floor of her bathroom in Dallas, Georgia. The crack of a gunshot rang out in the home she shared with her husband Andy and their children, and then silence, except for the sound of running water in the shower. Heather had been shot in the head, and yet 8 years later, no one can or will say what really happened. Her death wasn't ruled a homicide, but it wasn't ruled a suicide either. Instead, it sits in that shadowy limbo between the two, undetermined. Andy denies ever hurting Heather and is adamant that her death was a suicide. There are people who believe him, but for many, his story has way too many holes. Heather's family is still waiting for answers, still waiting for a day when the system acknowledges that something about her death never made sense. I'll have more videos that dig into Heather's final moments, and we'll look at who Andy Donovan Turner really is. We'll have more pieces of the puzzle, and while it may never fit perfectly together, perhaps it will be close enough to get an accurate picture, and that picture might answer the question, was Heather's death self-inflicted? Or was another hand holding the gun that May morning? Welcome to, or welcome back to, the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and I'm so glad you're here. I was asked to look into Heather Turner's case, and once I started digging into it, I knew I had to take it as far as I could. Andy Turner reminds me so much of John Paul Miller from the Micah Francis case that for me it was at first sight. In fact, the more I look into Andy and his annoying way of just existing, he reminds me more and more of John Paul. Even aspects of the cases are the same. It's almost as if John Paul learned about Heather's case and then decided he wanted to be just like Andy when he grew up. Aim higher, dude. I've seen Andy complain and threaten other people with copyright infringement for using photos of him that were found online, so I'm going to use one that has no copyright on it, his mugshot. Andy and Heather had met at church while they were both married to other people. Andy was one of the pastors at the church, and Heather had gone to him for marriage counseling. But instead of counseling, Andy offered her an affair. They both divorced their respective spouses and then were married on May 2nd, 2010. There is doubt that the marriage was legal, though, and we'll get to that in another video. Heather and Andy both had children prior to their marriage, and then had a daughter together. If you hear Andy talk, their marriage was just postcard perfect and everything was hunky-dory. But I think Andy's a big fat liar. There are emails from Heather that show her marriage was nowhere near perfect and was, in fact, quite bad. She alleged in more than a few emails that Andy had abused her and wrote descriptions of that abuse. There's at least one police report that also shows their marriage was not a happy one. Andy is the one who found Heather on the bathroom floor that early morning in May. At 6 a.m., he called 911 and told dispatch that his wife had shot herself. He said that he'd been in bed asleep and Heather had gotten up to take a shower. He heard a noise and then found Heather on the bathroom floor. I'm not going to play the call in its entirety as a lot of it is repetitive and the quality is horrible. The dispatcher tried her best to contain Andy throughout the call, but it sounded like he was all over the place. And if I had $1 for every time she told him, "Just take a deep breath, Andy," I would have a lot more dollars than I have now. The dispatcher starts with the normal information gathering, address, name, and phone. Then Andy started in with crying that sounds super fake to me. Here are a few clips from the call and you can judge for yourself. This is one of the first things I noticed that was so much like John Paul Miller. Do narcissists have a gene that makes them all fake cry the same way? The dispatcher asked Andy where the weapon was that Heather had used, and he said it's right beside her. She also asked what kind of gun it was, and he said it was a pistol. Now, did Andy really not know what kind of gun it was? I just think that people who own guns tend to refer to them by at least the caliber type, not just that it was a pistol. But maybe he did, and it just got lost in the garble of the bad reception. Then the dispatcher asked Andy if there was anyone with him.
Is there anybody else in the residence with you? Is it just you?
Oh, I got my baby daughter here.
Your baby daughter's there? Okay. Andy, is she in a different room?
I don't want her to walk in.
A couple of minutes later, the dispatcher returns to the subject of his daughter.
Andy, where is your daughter? Is she asleep?
She's asleep on the couch in the living room.
She's in the living room? Okay.
So let's be clear that he said his daughter was asleep on the sofa. Almost 9 minutes into the call, Andy starts retching, but I'm not going to make you listen to that. It's unclear if he ever actually threw up, though. The next couple of minutes are more of the dispatcher telling Andy to take a deep breath and that he was doing a great job. A little under 11 minutes into the call, Andy told the dispatcher that he was turning off the shower. Excuse me? The shower had been on the entire time? And why was it even on? Did Heather get out of the shower with it still running? I don't think I've ever known anyone to get out of the shower while it's still on, unless something or someone caused them to exit the shower without turning it off first. Maybe Heather had turned off the shower and Andy turned it on again. If so, it would be interesting to know why. Here's a little side note. Steam can degrade DNA at a crime scene. And another little side note. Andy said that Heather got in the shower that morning, got out, and then shot herself. But what if Heather had never gotten into the shower on her own? A few seconds later, Andy said something that sounded like, "Mama, you're here," or "We're in here," and then his mother talked to the dispatcher. She didn't say much, and then Andy's father talked to the dispatcher. If you're wondering why his parents were there at 6 in the morning, it's because Andy decided that instead of calling 911 first, he would call his parents. I understand that people react differently in a crisis, but if someone decides to call anyone before calling 911 after finding their spouse with a gunshot wound, something is wrong. EMS arrived at the scene 15 minutes after Andy called, but there was no hope for Heather. She was dead at the age of 35. One of the police reports from the day Heather died was written by Deputy Shannon Bradbury with the Paulding County Sheriff's Office, and it shows that the shooting occurred at 5:30 a.m. Why did Andy wait until 6 o'clock to call 911? We know he called his parents first, but what else was he doing for 30 minutes before calling for help? Was he making sure Heather was actually deceased before calling? I'm going to read the report in its entirety, and then we'll hit the points that stuck out to me. Quote, on the day of 5/4/2017, I was dispatched to address redacted in reference to a suicide call. Dispatch advised the call was a suicide attempt, and the complainant had informed them that the patient shot themselves in the head. Upon my arrival, Corporal Lewis and I walked up on an unidentified white male subject, who was later identified as Curtis Turner, standing in the front yard. Curtis Turner stated they were in the bathroom and told us to go in the house. When I entered the house, an unidentified white female, who was later identified as Pamela Turner, was sitting in the living room and stated they were in the bathroom by the bedroom and pointed in the direction. I noticed a closed door which led to the bedroom. When I entered the bedroom that Pamela Turner pointed to, I saw another closed door which led to the bathroom. Upon entering the bathroom, I noticed a lot of steam coming from the bathroom as someone had took a shower or using hot water. When I looked in the bathroom, I noticed an unidentified white male holding an unidentified white female on the floor in his arms. The male was later identified as Andy Turner, and the female was identified as Heather Turner. I noticed what appeared to be a gunshot on the left side of Heather Turner's cheek, right in front of her ear. I then asked Andy Turner where the gun was located, and he stated in the towel beside the toilet. I noticed the barrel and revolver of a pistol sticking out of a bloody towel lying on the floor beside the toilet. Metro arrived and Andy Turner was told he had to leave the room, and he got up and went with Curtis Turner. While Metro was giving medical attention to Heather Turner, I noticed a notepad with, "I'm sorry, I love you," wrote on it, laying on the vanity in the bathroom. There was also a cell phone laying by the notepad. Corporal Lewis and I then kept the scene secured until investigations arrived. I then spoke with Curtis Turner, who is Andy Turner's father, who stated he didn't know of Andy and Heather having any issues. Curtis Turner stated Heather Turner was upset because her grandfather passed away a week ago. Curtis Turner stated Heather Turner was raised by her grandparents and she was having a difficult time getting over his death. Curtis Turner stated Andy Turner called them before he called 911. I asked Curtis Turner what time was that, and he stated 5:59. I watched Curtis Turner get the correct time of the call off of his cell phone. Curtis Turner stated him and Andy's mother, Pamela Turner, got in the car and hurried over there. I then spoke with Andy Turner, who stated him and Heather Turner ate dinner at home last night. Andy Turner stated him and Heather Turner hung out in the bedroom last night and was talking amongst themselves and doing husband and wife things. Andy Turner stated Heather Turner got up to get ready for work this morning and he was laying on the bed. Andy Turner stated he heard a gunshot and jumped up and ran to the bathroom. Andy Turner stated he found Heather Turner in the bathroom. Andy Turner stated Heather Turner didn't act like she was thinking about harming herself last night nor this morning. Andy Turner stated Heather Turner's ex-husband was filing for adoption of her son they had together. Andy Turner stated Heather Turner was going to have to resign or be fired from her job this morning at the courthouse. Andy Turner also stated Heather Turner's grandfather died a week ago and she was having a hard time getting over it. Andy Turner stated when the incident occurred, he called his parents before he called 911. Sometime between investigations arriving, Andy Turner took off his bloody t-shirt he was wearing in the bathroom, and it was located on the floor close to the bedroom door. When detectives Lieutenant Christopher and Dykes arrived, the scene was turned over to them. End quote. Did you guys ever see the skit that Ellen DeGeneres did with Dennis Quaid, where she would send him into a restaurant and then she would be telling him in an earpiece what he had to say, and it was always, Dennis Quaid is hungry. That's what I thought of the entire time I was reading her report. Anyway, my first question when I read this was, where was Heather's daughter? The report mentioned that Pamela, Heather's mother-in-law, was sitting in the living room, so why didn't it mention the daughter? If she'd been asleep on the sofa, are we to believe that she slept through everyone responding to the scene tromping through the house? And if she was awake, why is there no mention of her in any of the reports? And why hadn't anyone taken her outside of the house where her mother just died? Where was the daughter? We heard Andy very plainly say she was there, that he didn't want her to come in and see Heather, and that she was asleep on the sofa. But Andy later changed his story. Instead of his daughter being asleep on the sofa, his new story is that they both heard the shot, got up, and met at the bathroom door at the same time. It's almost like he figured out he could use his daughter as an alibi. These days, she repeats his story, but she was only 8 at the time of Heather's death, and it's possible memories of that day were given to her rather than being actual memories. Andy also later said that at one time the coroner was upstairs with his daughter and his mother. So why isn't there a single mention of the daughter on the deputy's report? Quote, when I entered the house, an unidentified white female, who was later identified as Pamela Turner, was sitting in the living room and stated they were in the bathroom by the bedroom and pointed in that direction. I noticed a closed door which led to the bedroom. When I entered the bedroom that Pamela Turner pointed to, I saw another closed door which led to the bathroom. Upon entering the bathroom, I noticed a lot of steam coming from the bathroom as someone had took a shower or using hot water. End quote. Deputy Bradbury arrived on the scene at 6:13, which is 2 minutes later than Andy said he turned off the shower. And his parents had been in the bathroom by that point and walked out again, so how much steam was in that bathroom, and why didn't it dissipate when his parents were there? Did they all like hurriedly shuffle in the bathroom and close the door? I don't understand how there's still steam coming out. Did Andy turn the water on again? And why was he in there the entire time with the door closed, letting the shower steam up everything in the first place? Quote, I then asked Andy Turner where the gun was located, and he stated in the towel beside the toilet. I noticed the barrel and revolver of a pistol sticking out of a bloody towel lying on the floor beside the toilet. End quote. So in the 911 call, Andy had told the dispatcher that the gun was beside Heather. He said, right here beside her. But now it's wrapped up in a bloody towel? In the 911 call, the dispatcher had also told Andy to wrap Heather's head in a towel. So was this the towel that had been on her head? And if so, why did Andy take it off and why did he put the gun inside of it? Quote, while Metro was giving medical attention to Heather Turner, I noticed a notepad with, I'm sorry, I love you, wrote on it, laying on the vanity in the bathroom. There was also a cell phone laying by the notepad, end quote. So Andy himself has said that Heather left notes all the time. And family members of hers said the same thing, that she was constantly leaving little notes around the house. So how do we know that that wasn't one of those many notes that had been left for someone at a previous date? And it doesn't seem possible for Heather to have written the note that morning. Andy said she got up and went straight to the bathroom. And there wasn't a pen mentioned in any of the reports, so she didn't write the note while she was in the bathroom. And why wouldn't she have left a note for her children? And why leave a note that is so brief and generic? I've seen other letters that Heather wrote, and it seems like she was way more of a writer than that. Quote, I then spoke with Andy Turner, who stated him and Heather Turner ate dinner at home last night. Andy Turner stated him and Heather Turner hung out in the bedroom last night and was talking amongst themselves and doing husband and wife things. End quote. Is this moron calling sex husband and wife things? Either he was trying to distance himself from a lie, or he has the maturity of a seventh grader. You know what? It's probably both. But seriously, it seems as though he called it husband and wife time because maybe that didn't feel like as much of a lie as saying they'd spent the entire night having sex. And I'm not buying that he and Heather even had sex that night. Quote, Andy Turner stated Heather Turner got up to get ready for work this morning and he was laying on the bed. Andy Turner stated he heard a gunshot and jumped up and ran to the bathroom. Andy Turner stated he found Heather Turner in the bathroom, end quote. So even though now Andy has changed his story to it being him and his daughter having found Heather, at the time it happened, his daughter wasn't mentioned. Not in the 911 call and not in his statement to the police. Quote, Andy Turner stated Heather Turner didn't act like she was thinking about harming herself last night nor this morning. Andy Turner stated Heather Turner's ex-husband was filing for adoption of her son they had together. End quote. Well, Andy failed to mention that he was the reason that Heather's ex was trying to get custody of her son. And the reason was because the son showed back up to the father's after a visit with Heather and Andy and had bruises all over his body. Andy said it was because they had played ball together, but according to other sources, the court became involved and Heather was no longer allowed to have unsupervised visitation with her son. In Season 1, Episode 7 of the true crime show It Couldn't Happen Here, Hillary Burton Morgan spoke with Andy on the phone and asked him about the bruises on Heather's son. Andy said the state wasn't ever involved. But then when Hillary brought up that she had copies of the paperwork on it, here's how it went.
There are photos of her son's battered body. And so if you could walk me through that.
Yeah, I don't want all of that was handled way back then, and she even handled that and was part of that. I don't want to address that one.
Are there records that we can take a look at just on our end to make sure we're not portraying anything inaccurately?
Yeah, I mean, she went and talked to them, and they closed it. Nothing ever happened because she wouldn't and told them what happened that day.
I thought the court took her son out of your home and wouldn't let him come back.
No, that is 100% inaccurate. That never happened. The court was never involved. Never took him out.
I mean, there's a court. There's documents, Andy, that it went through the court.
And I see when people tell you stuff that's false, it's bad.
Well, there you have it, folks. No answer to the question, but instead a gem of wisdom from the little Weasley mouth of Andy Turner. When people tell you stuff that's false, that's bad. That needs to be on a billboard somewhere. A giant picture of Andy with that turd nugget of a quote on it. Quote, Andy Turner stated Heather Turner was going to have to resign or be fired from her job this morning at the courthouse, end quote. This is true. That was going to happen, and according to Heather's co-conspirator and the reason she was going to have to quit or get fired, Heather was opting to quit. On that same episode of It Couldn't Happen Here, that co-conspirator was interviewed. His name is Rob Aber. Rob stated that he and Heather had started a relationship, and the two had exchanged many emails. I don't know if the relationship was physical, but it was definitely emotional. Now, it started as a friendship. Rob was someone that Heather could confide in about her marriage and about the abuse she suffered. In the emails, Heather told Rob of her plans to leave Andy and said it was going to happen the night of May 4th, 2017, the day she died. The probate judge at the time was Deborah Anderson. She had called Heather and Rob into her office on May 3rd and had a stack of printed emails on the desk, the emails that they had exchanged. That's when she told them that they could either quit the next day or be fired due to having a relationship with a coworker. Let's think about how Andy knew that Heather was going to be fired or forced to quit. If Heather told him, what reason did she give him? Are we supposed to believe that she told him she was going to quit her job and then run off with Rob? And Andy was all like, hey, no problem, it's cool. Can we go do husband and wife things now? Andy had known about the emails between Heather and Rob. He had gotten into Heather's email and found the messages that she deleted. But had he seen the one about Heather leaving him, or did someone else tell Andy about the email about Heather leaving him? Someone else who worked in the probate office. Like maybe Pamela Turner, Andy's mother. That's right, kids. Pam was Heather's coworker, and she and the probate judge were friends. Now, I can see Judge Debbie giving Pam the lowdown on the situation before it happened. And if so, if Andy is ever found guilty of Heather's murder, are the two women culpable as well? I'm not sure that legally anything could be done, but if Judge Debbie shared emails with Pam, I'll bet a civil suit could happen. And if Judge Debbie had the emails between Heather and Rob, then she knew about Heather's claims of Rob abusing her. But let's pretend that Heather did tell Andy she was leaving him. What if he spent the night drinking and became angry, and by morning he just lost it? It wouldn't be the first time he drank all night and got angry, at least not according to a police report filed on 4/12/2017. It read, quote, at approximately 0832, Debbie Hendricks from probate clerk's office called and said, Judge Anderson wants you to call her on her cell. At approximately 0839, I spoke with Judge Anderson, and she stated her employee, Heather Turner's husband, has gone off the deep end, that he was coming up to the office harassing her. Last night he'd gotten drunk and wrecked the company car, and he's at home sitting on the porch with a gun. Judge wanted to know if we could keep him from coming into the building. I told the judge that Heather needed to get a restraining order, that this is a public building, but we could get him out if he's harassing Heather in their office or causing a disturbance, that security would check him good before letting him in the building. End quote. So Judge Debbie didn't just know about Andy from Heather's emails, she also knew firsthand. Heather never took out that restraining order. Quote, sometime between investigations arriving, Andy Turner took off his bloody t-shirt he was wearing in the bathroom, and it was located on the floor close to the bedroom door, end quote. So did law enforcement take that shirt in as evidence, or did they leave it there for Andy to dispose of? The coroner's report didn't have a lot of information that wasn't in Deputy Bradbury's report, but I'll read it and then hit the parts that were different. Quote, Andy Turner stated his wife, Heather, was to be fired from her job at the Paulding County Probate Court on the day of her death. He stated that on the previous evening of May 3rd, 2017, they had dinner at home and husband and wife time. He stated that this carried on into the night all night. On May 4th, 2017, she kissed him and went to the bathroom to get ready for work. He heard the shower running and a shot a short time later. He ran into the bathroom and began CPR. Heather was found on her back in the floor, naked. Her hair was wet from her shower. She had an entrance wound appears to have been the right side of her head, and there may have been a possible exit on the left side. No bullet was recovered, and there were no markings present in the wall or surrounding area that we observed. Mr. Turner stated that his wife had been going through a lot recently with the prospect of losing her job. In addition, her grandfather had passed a few weeks earlier, on or near the anniversary of her mother's death. Also, her ex-husband had notified her that he was going to be filing papers to get custody of her son and that his new wife was planning to adopt him. Mr. Turner stated that Heather seemed to be in good spirits, even though these things were going on, and never voiced suicidal ideations. There was alcohol present on one of the nightstands in the bedroom, and a wall near the toilet had appeared to be washed. Scene photos were taken by the Paulding County Sheriff's Department, and Mrs. Turner was transported to the GBI in Decatur on 5/4/2017 for autopsy. The body bag she was placed in was sealed with seal numbers stated above. At last update, GBI medical examiner has ruled this case pending investigation. Update: case ruled undetermined by GBI medical examiner. All of this is true to the best of my knowledge. Lindsay Everhart, Paulding County Coroner, May 8th, 2017. End quote. So let's start with this part. On May 4th, 2017, she kissed him and went to the bathroom to get ready for work. He heard the shower running and a shot a short time later. He ran into the bathroom and began CPR. Oh, Andy, she was leaving you, you putz. No one's going to believe that she kissed you that morning. In future videos, we'll look at how much Andy is trying to make it look like Heather had planned her death and did her best to make her last night on Earth all about him. It is so egotistical. And how is it possible that Andy immediately began CPR? Was he supposed to have started CPR, performed it for 15 minutes, stopped to call his parents, performed it for another 10 minutes or so, and then called 911? I don't think CPR was started until he was on the phone with 911. And even then, I'm not convinced there was much effort made on his part. Quote, Heather was found on her back in the floor naked. Her hair was wet from her shower. She had an entrance wound appears to have been the right side of her head, and there may have been a possible exit on the left side. No bullet was recovered, and there were no markings present in the wall or surrounding area that we observed. End quote. I'm still not sure if any bullet was ever found. There was no bullet at the scene, and there were subsequent accounts that a bullet was never recovered from Heather's body either. However, in a May 2nd, 2025 11 Alive article, the Paulding County Sheriff Ashley Henson said that was false and that the sheriff's office has noted a projectile. Well, that's not very clear. Where exactly does the sheriff's office note that? He also said, quote, I want people to know there's a whole lot more that people don't know than what they do know, end quote. Doesn't that phrase always seem to be the response when someone in authority doesn't really want to answer the question or when they're trying to cover up something? He added that his goal was to sift through the noise and seek the truth. Sir, I know you haven't been sheriff for very long, but you've worked at the sheriff's office for more than a decade. How long does your office need to sift? I would think by now that the flour is sifted and you need to just make the dang cake already. Quote, there was alcohol present on one of the nightstands in the bedroom, and a wall near the toilet it appeared to be washed, end quote. So I wonder whose side of the bed the alcohol was on. And why was that bathroom wall cleaned? In that same 11 Alive article, Sheriff Doolittle said that the wall hadn't been cleaned. So why did the coroner include that note in her report? He also said that the sheriff's office made mistakes in the beginning of the investigation and that they would have liked to have collected more evidence. But then he said he didn't think it would have made any difference in the outcome of the case. Well, how in the heckety heck do you know that if you don't know what evidence you might have missed? I didn't know Heather, but to me, her death does not make sense as a suicide. Even if we ignore that she had never been diagnosed with depression She didn't have symptoms of it and had never talked about ending her life. The suicide itself doesn't make sense. Why would she get up, take a shower like she did every day, and then without even drying off or turning off the shower, decide to shoot herself? Why not just shoot herself in the shower? And the note doesn't make sense either. To me, her death makes a lot more sense as a homicide than it does a suicide. And that's where I'll leave it for now. I'll be back before long with more about Randy Andy, his newest wife, his affairs, and more about how he's tried to spin the narrative and has contradicted himself. The individuals I've talked about in this episode are innocent until proven guilty, and that includes Andy Turner, but I still think he's super gross. I want to give a huge thank you to the administrator of the Justice for Heather Nicole Turner page on Facebook for allowing me to take documents and information from the page to help put this video together. You should go give the page a like on Facebook and follow Justice for Heather Turner on TikTok, and I'll leave links to both in the description box. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, as this helps my channel grow and get stories like Heather's out to more people. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.